Hi everybody, welcome to Shivers. Today we're doing a list of the top 13 most gory movies that are out there. The early 2000s were a wild time. So I'll go through this list and sort of rate them the same way as I do for movie reviews, but also go through a little bit of the summary for each of them. So these are in chronological order. Getting started, our first one is Faces of Death. This is from 1978. This has to make the list simply because it is true gore. This is something that nobody knows how it was actually allowed to be made, but it's the idea that these are all real deaths that are being recorded just on video. So you can still find that on YouTube. It's a pretty disturbing watch. I mean, anything that's in this list is going to be a pretty disturbing watch, but you do have Faces of Death being the only thing that's actually authentic on this list. So for that reason, it has to be included. But for it to be from 1978, that's pretty crazy. In second place, we have Maniac from 1980. This seems like a pretty tame choice. You know, the only gore that we have is through individual murders, whereas like as we get through this list, there's mass group things going on. But Maniac does get put on this list for the simple fact that it brought a lot of actual blood to the screen. This is something that not a lot of people had seen before this, other than in just the really early slasher movies. But this is the first one that felt like an actual serial killer. So for that reason, Maniac gets put on this list. For the creativity of its time, that gets put on this list. I guess no spoilers necessarily, but there is a specific scene at closer towards the end of Maniac where the main killer, the maniac, is scalping somebody. So that gives you an idea of what kind of gore we're talking about for the time. Next on this list, also sort of has to be included, is Cannibal Holocaust. This is also from 1980. There are a group of movies that are part of what's called the Video Nasties, and on that list are movies that like should have never been made or are not really good for public consumption, that type of thing. Cannibal Holocaust is always on that list, remains on that list, I should say. But Cannibal Holocaust is all about these people who are just students going through a documentary of the wilderness, basically, and come across this tribe. And all of this crazy stuff starts happening with this tribe. There is animal cruelty in this movie, which has a lot of people upset, but it's also just brutal. So I would probably stay away from that one. It's not necessarily much of a story, but we will come back to that in a moment. Next on the list is The Evil Dead. This is where we get into a little bit more modern territory. This came out in 1981. This has a ton of practical effects. This is the type of movie that we really want to see when we're talking about gore. You know, Evil Dead from 2013 is one of my favorite movies, and I love it for the creativity of it, for the creativity of the death scenes, for the creativity of the way that all of these characters go through the cabin. So Evil Dead, the original, definitely, of course, gets credit where credit is due. So Evil Dead from 1981, great job for bringing all of that to the table. Next on this list is called Brain Dead. It's also known as Dead Alive. This came out in 1992, so we're jumping 10 more years. This is a little bit more sci-fi comic book dystopian than stereotypical horror, but it's the idea that this mother gets bit by this creature and then starts just becoming like hungry for anything. So a lot of people say that this is the goriest movie ever made simply for the fact that she's just eating things. There is also a very iconic lawnmower scene in this movie. So anybody who's a fan of Sinister, it's kind of, that was borrowed from that a little bit. But Brain Dead, Dead Alive is more for my sci-fi horror fans rather than stereotypical horror fans. Next on this list, of course, credit has to give where credit is due. We have Saw from 2004. I only included the first of some of these series that we have coming up just for the sake of it. Saw, of course, is really what brought modern torture porn, modern gore to the table. I have been very vocal that I'm a huge fan of the Saw franchise. It's my favorite horror franchise. It is the epitome of make sure that you're watching a movie for the story rather than just watching it for the effects and for what's going on. If you just watch all of the Saw movies for all of their gore and everything that's going wrong with the characters, then no wonder you're going to think that the Saw franchise is bad. But if you look at it from a perspective of being grateful for life and having a thirst for life, and really the idea that all of these people are not necessarily great people, are still fighting to survive, that's the point, is are you grateful for life? Are you going to choose live or die? It's 100% up to you. So Saw is what brought really that modern gore that we know of. When I think of gore, many people, myself included, think of Saw. So after that, we do have Hostel, which only came out a year later, from 2005. Hostel is created by Eli Roth. Eli Roth has really become like the father figure of torture movies. He created Hostel. He created a movie that we're going to mention in a moment. And he also included Cabin Fever. He created Cabin Fever. Cabin Fever is not on this list, but it is a gory watch. And he's not afraid to shy away from being too much, being extra. So I do love Eli Roth. Even the movie that he created just 2 or 3 years ago, Thanksgiving, lots and lots of gore in what could have just been like a silly, campy holiday movie. So I really have an appreciation for Eli Roth. I like that he really doesn't listen to anybody else's opinion on how he should make movies. He's just making them to how he wants. So Hostel was a really great way to start that. And anybody who I ask in my own circles, what's the goriest movie you've ever watched? Almost all of them say Hostel. So it is interesting that it gets a little bit of an edge on the Saw franchise for some people. Next up, we have Martyrs from 2008. This is a movie that I myself have never seen, but it is on every single list of the most gory movies that really ever exist. So I'm going to skip over the explanation for that one. If you have watched Martyrs, let me know what your thoughts are, if it deserves to be on this list or not. After Martyrs, we have the Tokyo Gore Police. This came out in 2008 also. So that's why I say the early 2000s were a pretty wild time. But Tokyo Gore Police is also one of those that's a little bit more for the sci-fi fans. This is really focused on more of like a dystopian Tokyo, where all of these people are turning into engineers. And it's a lot of body horror. It's a lot of political scare, but it's just painted with gore. It's literally what it's called. It's Tokyo Gore Police. So if you want something that's a little bit more creative, but has that sci-fi feel, this one's for you. Next up is The Human Centipede from 2009. I was hesitant to put this on the list because it's not what I would necessarily consider gore. This is more of that body horror side of things. But for the sake of what it really brought to the table, I gotta give The Human Centipede some credit. So again, this came out in 2009, just 1 year after all of these have come out in a row, and focuses on more American travelers going to Europe and bad things happening. So 3 of them get stuck in this trap, I guess you can say, at this doctor's house who wants to create a human centipede. And I'm sure by now you can all imagine what the human centipede looks like, but for the sake of what they go through, that is really the idea, is that they become a human centipede. So again, it's not really stereotypical gore. If you like gore movies like me, you probably won't like The Human Centipede just because I don't know what there's to like about it. But again, like I said, I have to give credit where credit is due. After this, we have the other Eli Roth movie. This is The Green Inferno from 2013. So The Green Inferno is the idea that all of the students who are at Cannibal Holocaust are creating a documentary. The documentary is then supposed to be The Green Inferno. So I love the full circle nature of it, but The Green Inferno itself is not a good movie. It is just gory. It is just in your face. It's a little bit of splatter. We have a movie that is just kind of hard to sit through. That is what deserves to be on this list. So the Green Inferno is something that's definitely going to test your tolerance. So I would always recommend it for any exploration. But if you're looking for an actual good movie with a good story, this is not going to be it. After Green Inferno, we have the only other one that I was iffy to sort of put on this list, but that is Tusk from 2014. We're starting to see this shift from stereotypical gore to body horror a little bit. We have a lot of body horror movies in the late 80s, early 90s, so it's not a new concept, but this is more of a new concept in blending it with a little bit of gore. We see that a lot with like The Fly early on as well, but for Tusk, this and The Human Centipede to me are just like tasks to see if you can sit through them and how much do you relate to the characters and see sort of the transformation of what they're going through inflicted by somebody else, not just some bite or creature or whatever. So Tusk is interesting. We'll leave it at that. And then the last on this list, of course, also has to be included is Terrifier from 2016. We have Terrifier 2 from 2022 and Terrifier 3 from 2024. I know I said like the Saw and like Hostel. I'm not going to include like the second or the third, but Terrifier's whole goal, is to become the goriest movie ever made. And I think they do that pretty well. I have been very vocal and been yelled at enough that I am not a Terrifier fan, but from a gore perspective, the appreciation sure is there, especially from Terrifier 2 and one specific scene that is stuck. If it gets stuck in your head, you know they did a good job. This is the whole scene of the girl in her bedroom. I don't want to spoil too much, but the girl in the bedroom and Art the Clown is just brutal, basically. So if you want what I would consider probably the goriest scene I've ever watched, go check that scene specifically out. Just probably like Terrifier bedroom scene. We have a lot of really great gory scenes from Saw and Hostel as well, really poignant moments. To me, they have better stories than something like a Terrifier does, but really where we see all of this horror trend going now is more in the direction of dread, which is a whole different ballgame and a whole different conversation that we will tackle more in the winter time, because I think wintertime is the perfect time for gory, dreadful movies. So that is our top 13 in order from oldest to newest of most gory movies. If you have any others that you want to add to that list, let me know. If you have watched Martyrs, let me know. So thank you as always for watching. We will see you next week.